I thought, given it was called Culture Now, we should start pretty much right now and talk about Hussein's last two collections, Spring-Summer 2011 and Autumn-Winter 2011-2012, which are kind of twin collections.
Yes.
Two parts. Is there going to be a third, or is this?
No.
This is it. So they're kind of twin collections. They go together. And instead of a catwalk show, both were shown as films presented to the kind of audience as films in the last two fashion weeks. So I thought we'd watch a small section of each film and then maybe unpick some of the ideas. So can we start with Sakoku, which was shown last October and is Spring-Summer 2011, so it's the collection that's kind of in shops now. So can we show the small excerpt of that film, please? Maybe while we're waiting. Do you want to explain what Sakoku means?
Yeah, Sakoku in Japanese means closed country, and these two collections were actually based on my interpretation of Japan, but in the sort of least obvious way for me, because I've been there so many times. It was based on my sort of more abstract observations, and I felt that a lot of the aspects of Japan was very much connected to, or the things I observed I felt were very connected to being closed in the past to the rest of the world. And I felt that that sort of isolation helped maybe the culture evolve in a certain way, the way they are sort of resourceful, or the way kind of the rituals have kind of evolved. And the second collection is called Kaikoku, which means open country. And it was the idea of how then Japan kind of got Americanized, and again, sort of the Western influence in Japan. But again, I try to look at it from a more abstract kind of perspective.
Here we are. This is Sakoku. that's sort of about a 2-minute section of a film that's about 20 minutes overall. And can you explain maybe the context of the film?
Yeah, sure. So the whole collection was divided into sections. So this was called Haiku. Many of you might know it's like Japanese poetry. And actually the drapes make up each letter of the word Sonzai Suru, which means exist in Japanese. And when you, if you see the garments together, it makes up that word. So each drape is a letter. And the idea was to animate the word, so the word became alive. And I chose bunraku agents to kind of create almost like this sort of the wind in the clothes. And it was all based on how the theater is constructed in Japan, where the agents are actually visible and everything about the rest of the culture is very hidden, and how in the case of theater, what you would expect to be hidden actually is visible. So I thought that was kind of charming and silly and sort of weird, but sort of, I don't know, sort of sinister as well. And I like the idea that they kind of made the word, gave the word a sense of life, let's say.
I mean, is sakoku, is that a word that the Japanese would use to describe, was it a deliberate policy in Japan?
Yeah, it was actually, the isolation policy was called sakoku. And yeah, and I, like I said, my reason for calling the whole project that was because I feel a lot of Japanese kind of way of life is very connected to that isolation period.
And what drew you to Japan at this moment? Why was it?
Well, imagine that's like a year and nearly a year ago, that collection. I thought that I'd never done anything based on Japan, and it's somewhere that I've been like for many, many times. And I felt, instead of basing it on like cherry blossoms or kimonos or whatever, that, you know, there were so many sort of, I think of it as like a, almost a alien country. And I always had these observations that I've collected over the years, and I thought, why not do something? It's almost like so obvious for a designer to do something based on Japan, but I thought, well, I can do it in an unobvious way. And that's why I did it.
Can we see the next film? So the next film,
Kaikoku. Yeah.
And it was, you showed it in Paris.
Again, yeah.
In February, and it's next.
Yeah.
So again, this is a similar thing. It's a kind of 2-minute extract of about a 20-minute film that was shown in place of a fashion show in Paris in February this year. Can you explain? Hussein asked me before we came why I picked that extract, and to me, I mean, we'd talked about the Haiku extract before, and particularly I was intrigued by the fact that these agents who are meant to be invisible become actually the kind of really the most visible part of the whole scene. And I picked that because, again, it's the reoccurrence of the agents, and yet they're doing something quite different. And can you explain what the kind of...
Well, there's this revolving door which the Bunraku agents are actually operating. And it was this idea of, in a way, you know, I guess the door produced each garment, and I liked the fact that it was kind of the burgundy, the depth of the burgundy was something for me that was quite, in a way, very English, gentleman's kind of colour, and then it was how kind of the English then went to America, and then how maybe America could come, you know, through the agents, let's say. So, and the kind of the Western kind of soundtrack with it, I thought it was such a combination of different elements. Mm-hmm. But again, it was really that they were releasing something, and it was a kind of, like I said, like a Western attitude in the garments, but you still sense the, I don't know, there were still agents controlling the situation, but they're also servants, and I like this idea that they're empowered, but yet they're kind of there to serve. Mm-hmm. Also that I find that when in Japan, when they kind of refer to Western codes, I always find it quite exaggerated. And so it was really a combination of these mm-hmm. ideas.
Why did you show both those collections as films rather than catwalk shows?
Well, our shows are so charged off, you know, like every season that at first I thought this could be an interesting change for me, doing, you know, a film, thinking that actually, you know, maybe I could also show the clothes with the film, so when the press came, they can see the film and then they can look at the clothes close up, because I felt that people, I actually don't think the showpieces we do creates the main influence in the industry that we're in. I think actually it's the collections, but the showpieces and the show takes over, and I felt this could be a good opportunity for people to look at the clothes and the way they're made. There's a lot of effort that goes into these clothes. They're not, I mean, I spend most of my time trying to eliminate seams or, you know, actually fitting clothes. That I was kind of tired of being seen as a designer that can only do shows. Mm-hmm. And actually, the clothes and the shows is what really takes my time. Otherwise, you can, you know, it's what makes the shows what they are. Mm-hmm. So I felt this would be a good change for me, but actually doing a film has been a lot more work because of you have to edit afterwards. You have to, I'm a perfectionist, and I'm there sitting with, you know, in the editing suite for hours and hours. And, but I think what it's led to is that people really wrote about the clothes when they came to do the review, and I was really pleased because it was for a change, like not about how they were moved in the show. It was actually talking about the clothes. So it's been a really good exercise, and hopefully this season we're doing a show. So,
I mean, do you think you slightly set a trap for yourself then with the spectacular shows that you became?
Sorry to interrupt. Can the first two photos turn your mobiles off? Because it picks up the roaming on the mics at the front.
Oh, I don't remember to turn my mobile off, actually. You said that. Is your mobile off?
it's off.
Yeah.
So I don't see the doing shows or the, you know, setting a level as being a trap. I just think that I always wanted my presentations to be a cultural experience, and I always had most of the time live music. You know, I think that I have a world, and the collections, I want them to be sort of presented in a way where somebody who's not interested in fashion could also be enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess it comes down to the fact that I see fashion as a part of culture rather than this sort of separate world that it's perceived to be.
It's interesting you say that, because I was wondering, is fashion, when you started in fashion, was its place in culture different to now? I mean, has fashion become a different kind of culture?
Definitely. I think when we first started out, so I started in '94, you know, there was, for a start, there weren't that many designers around, so when the new generation of designers came, there was space for us to do things, and it was like I'm in the same generation as Alexander McQueen and Owen Gaster and Copperwhite Blundell, all these people. There was space for us to do things. You know, it wasn't like now where every single person wants to be a designer. And I think that you know, I wanted to really, I mean, since I was a student at St. Martin's, I always thought that if I was to do this take this path, that I wanted it to be integrated with other ideas, because I was more excited about the connection of fashion to the rest of the world, and rather than this sort of isolated world. I think as, you know, as time passed, I think that these different, you know, the art world, fashion world, design world, I think have merged more, you know, and even like the emergence of magazines like Wallpaper, or, you know, the fact that then you would have designers invite artists, and maybe, you know, football players would be in a fashion show, and you did have more and more, you know, different worlds merging, and I think the fashion show was seen as the event where, I think it's to do with power, and I think you've said that as well before, where, you know, sitting in the front row of a fashion show was a sort of symbol of power in some way. So I think in one hand, these disciplines have merged. On the other hand, I think sometimes I find that people who do want to be involved in fashion, or want to go to shows and stuff, you know, do see it as their entry into a sort of this powerful hub, let's say. So I have mixed feelings about it. So I think there's been this sort of emergence, but then I think that it's also kind of power associated with it. So, you know.
Can you still kind of embed the kinds of, I mean, when you began designing, you were kind of known for embedding quite complex ideas into clothes and shows. And do you think it's still possible to do that with the kinds of attention that it gets?
I honestly think that in fashion, if you've got you know, brain cells, I think you're seen as intense, and you're seen as difficult and unapproachable and heavy and all those stupid things. And I think that because a lot of the time, a lot of fashion people are not interested in a lot of things in the world, I find, that if they meet someone who is, they think, oh, you're intense, and you are heavy, and you're this and you're that. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, I mean, I create processes, or I'm interested in ideas, so I can actually design and be inspired. And these ideas don't just come out of thin air. You know, they take research, experimentation, all that. And I think this is a rich way of working. I think, you know, you should kind of encourage someone to be that way, not discourage them. And so I think that for me, really, there is room to work this way. I think I am a minority. I think most designers don't work like me. And sometimes I kind of really see myself as an artist who happens to do fashion, really. And
I mean, now you do make pieces that are shown in galleries. I mean, you say made a show at the Listen Gallery quite recently, and also you had a one-man show at the Istanbul Modern.
Yeah, yeah.
When was that?
It was last July. And
I mean, why is it fashion's failure that you have to move to the art world to express your ideas?
Good question. No, I think that if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I don't think that I would have got such interest in my work. I think it's the fact that I am a designer that is inspired by other worlds, and I think that's what makes the work what it is. I think if I was only an artist, maybe it will be a lot duller. I don't know. I think it's the fact that it is the sort of, I am using the body, and I'm creating environments like this that create this sort of point of interest, really.
I mean, do you feel when you operate in the two separate spheres, do you feel that there's a very self-conscious difference in me making a film?
No, I think for me it's all one. Because when I talk about my ideas, I talk about them as ideas. I don't think, oh, you're an artist, therefore I should talk to you differently. I just talk about the ideas. And for me, it's about the ideas, ultimately. And I've evolved in this way that I can't separate it anymore as, you know, this is the clothes and this is the ideas. And of course, when somebody buys a garment from us, they just buy it because they like it, and they don't have to know about the ideas behind it. And the ideas are for me to be inspired, so I can create a process. But like I said, I think that I work like an artist who happens to use clothes as his medium, I think. And it took me a long time to admit this, because I always thought, how can I call myself an artist? That's such a kind of big title. But so what? Maybe it's not.
And when you say you use kind of clothes as a medium for ideas, I mean, are you interested in the history of fashion, or specifically, or is it kind of, how do you research?
I am interested in the history of fashion because, you know, we've always created, attire. We always wanted to look a certain way, and it reflected also the environment that we were in, or the atmosphere that we, you know, or the political atmosphere, or the social scenario that we were in. So definitely, I think I am interested in fashion history because it shaped our lives up to a point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, kind of, I studied design history, so this is kind of maybe a personal question, but there's sort of two sides, because there's, as a design historian, you look at clothes and you kind of make ideas around them and make theories, and in a sense, the clothes express a culture, but not deliberately so. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. In a sense that you might look at a kind of formal gentleman's suit from the 19th century and see that as an expression of a certain kind of culture and attitude towards masculinity. But when you take garments and you deliberately invest those garments with the kind of that idea, is there a different, do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Is there something different going on?
You create a new comment. You can create a new comment on what already exists, or you can reinterpret a sort of the semiotic idea of what a jacket might represent to you. Mm-hmm. So I think I do play with codes that people are familiar with, and I do alter them, or I try to create a new perspective on it. So yes, I can apply idea onto something that may have sat in a different context in the past, and I think that decontextualization is what I could be wanting to explore at that time.
Mm. I mean, are there any kinds of subjects that are inappropriate for fashion to touch? And kind of famously, there was it a Westwood collection that kind of looked at homeless
All right.
people? I mean, do you think is there an ethical element?
Well, I think it depends on how you work the idea. I mean, if she was super moved by people on the streets and she wanted to do something about them, I think it depends on the approach. No, I don't think there is. I mean, it depends on how genuinely she got into it. I think if she was genuinely inspired, I mean, that is a part of life, why not? But then, I can imagine it can offend people, absolutely.
I mean, I suppose the why not becomes the commercial context, which, that they become outfits to buy, and it becomes part of a marketing machine.
Well, that's a whole other issue, that we sell clothes that come from ideas, and you can say, well, there are two different concerns, that ideas are one thing and selling the clothes is another. Well, I mean, I think that for me, in the case of, I can't really answer for Westwood, but I can answer for myself, that there is always that duality, that you have ideas and then it actually is a product and you have to sell it. It has to fit well, it has to look good, it has to be well made. And I do like that duality, because it means that you can have these ingredients that tell a story, but you can also wear them, and without even knowing what it's about, because you just happen to like it, and why not? Do you have to know what it's about? You can just like it. And I do like that duality. I also think same about the art world, where there are a lot of people, who buy things without necessarily understanding what it's about, because they need to be seen to buy it. And you can say that about anything that you consume these days, that, I think that there are people who do buy our stuff who genuinely appreciate the cut and who genuinely appreciate, you know, the way things fit, and they don't necessarily know where it's come from. And so there is that side of what we do, which is the craftsmanship in a way. And then there is the ideas. And the ideas are really always there for the presentation. And, you know, actually, it's a bit like food, I guess. The way it's presented is going to be different to the way it tastes. And I guess the equivalent could be said about us. The collections, the way we present them, is different to how you would feel about wearing them. So it is an industrial thing. You do have to kind of know about how to fit clothes, how to make clothes, you know, understand the body. But then, in my case, I also like doing films like this or the shows that I've done in the past.
Do you imagine that the kind of, I mean, fashion is quite formalised, and if you look at collections online, you know, they tend to have a certain number of looks, and those films also contain that number of looks, and they come up at regular intervals. I mean, do you find that rigid and kind of difficult to...
I try to not be bound by formulas as such, but I think usually by the time I've explored an idea, I normally have a similar number of looks every time, and then the length of the film varies. I don't think that I've been bound by them so much. I mean, generally after sort of 20 minutes, somebody's attention on something like this could kind of get a bit hairy, but generally I think...
it's interesting you come up with that number of looks, because maybe that's, in a sense, something to do with your education, that you were kind of inculcated to fashion codes.
I definitely, I mean, I have got some, I mean, I studied fashion, I mean, and, you know, I think that there's, you know, I was very happy to do so, and I think it's about the expiry of an idea. I think that sometimes I know that an idea can expire quite quickly if I extend the time too much. And actually, to get down to, like, let's say 40 outfits, I have to design probably 200-300 outfits, or even more. I mean, I only like one sketch out of maybe every 50 that I do. So it's quite kind of wasteful process. I mean, you must be, so since Sakoku and Kaikoku, were they conceived as a pair initially? Yeah, because I like the idea of that one was closed country and the other one was open country, and I didn't know what I was going to do for Kaikoku, but I knew that I wanted this sort of second collection that was a kind of an extension. And the new one we're doing has nothing to do with this at all. I was wondering, can you talk at all about the new one, or is that too... Because that must be what you're doing. Yeah, now. I don't think I can talk about it because it's still developing, and but it's very different. I mean, what's the first process of thinking about an idea for collection? I mean, what's the first thing that you hang on to? The first idea I would have is it's normally whether I'm going to react to the previous season or not, and then it will be about whether we're going to carry on existing languages also from the past, let's say 2-3 years ago, or even 5-10 years ago, because a lot of my ideas, I'm finding I go back to them and they're timeless. You know, they still look good now in a lot of, you know, in many ways. So I am in this sort of process now where I feel a lot of people weren't ready for the kind of work I was doing at the time. Is there a specific example? I'll show you so many examples. I can't sort of pinpoint, but I feel that when I was showing in London, there were so many things, and actually even in Paris early on, that then I think becomes part of fashion later. And then you think, well, hang on, why didn't people buy my stuff when I was doing that? You know, and so what I'm doing now is going back to a lot of my archives and then reinterpreting them, and then hopefully they're also imbued with new ideas, because I think that now my house language is much more important than trying to do something brand new every time, because when you do something very new every time, people don't react well because they don't know how to absorb it. They can only absorb what they're already familiar with. So we're trying to create familiarity with, you know, in a way, our repertoire, than always doing something completely alien, because they get confused. So I'm trying to create a continuum, but also inject new ideas into that every time. And this has been like what I've been doing in the last kind of 2-3 years, really. I mean, has the whole kind of notion of fashionability changed? I think it strikes me sometimes that things are getting so quick in terms of the cycles of fashion that almost everything's fashionable simultaneously. I mean, things
the perverse sort of effect of things becoming so quick is that dating seems to have almost expired. I don't know.
I think that it's to do with obviously digital media and to do with the fact that a lot of high street stores have their own production chains that, you know, they can look at our stuff on style.com before we can even produce it, and they can get it onto their shop floor a lot earlier. So it's become really disposable, obviously. And I think that the role of people like myself should be maybe to always have an element of something new. But also we need to be given a chance to, you know, we need to also increase the number of people we can appeal to, so that, how can I put it, you know, we don't just sort of get marginalized and kind of shrink, because there is always that danger that, I mean, now there's celebrities becoming designers as well. You stand no chance of competing with their network. You just don't stand a chance. I mean, how could I compete with someone that already knows every single person that could possibly buy expensive clothes? You know, so you think to yourself, well, as long as you are happy and content in what you have, and you can grow gradually and not compete with people who have much bigger budgets and, you know, who can reach a lot more people, I think you'll be happy. If you compare yourself with people who are much more powerful, you'll be depressed all the time.
Yeah. I mean, do you think there are fashion worlds now? I suppose that there are just so many different, you know, it's really, and I suppose that's true of the art world as well. There's an art world, but there are so many different sort of small
Definitely.
worlds.
I think that there is the sort of, there are business owners in fashion who are not designers, but they're business owners and who have other designers that work for them solely. And then there are, you know, then there are the sort of people who just license their name because they're a well-known figure and they want to create aspirational collections who, you know, because they think there might be a following out there of that person who wants to look like them. And then there is like the proper designers that still draw and drape and still fit. There's so many models.
And would you feel close to other designers?
I feel close to the Belgian designers because I find them a lot more down to earth. And I mean, I find that I've been actually lamenting about this, that in London, because it's so competitive, designers are so unwilling to be friendly with other designers because there might be some information leaked or whatever. I don't know what it is, but people are they take themselves so seriously, and you think, God, like, there's never room for any kind of friendship, really. Whereas I found that the Belgian and the Dutch designers, yeah, I found them to be more open somehow. And although I was raised here, I think my background, and my Turkish Cypriot background, I think, you know, is Mediterranean, and you know, I like being social and I like conversation. And I guess, I don't know, I haven't found the London designers to be that warm, to be honest.
I mean, what would be, it looks like we've got quite a lot of fashion students in the audience, and I wondered if you would have any advice on a designer starting out now.
I mean, I think that, for a start, I think the only way of being a designer is not to have your own company. I think I think to be a designer and to run a business are two separate things. So I think one thing I would suggest is, before you enter that kind of the realms of being a designer, decide whether you would want to run a business and be a designer, or you'd like to be a designer where you have no business worries, somebody else does that, you're paid, and you can still be creative. I think the important thing is to really enjoy your work, and you could be an assistant to someone and still feel empowered, and that's as valid as having your own operation. I think a lot of people are trained to think that they have to be designers, and St. Martin's and places like that. I mean, I went to St. Martin's, and we were pushed to be designers, but I wouldn't have done it had I not got the opportunities. And also, I started at a time where there was room for it. I mean, now, there's just too many people doing this, and you think, God, do you really have a reason to do this? Really think about it, because you can have a good role also in an existing company, and also do it if you either have the network where you think you can reach people, or you have something new to say. And I think there are a lot of people doing this who don't have anything new to say, and they like the idea of being a designer, and they like the lifestyle. So I don't know. It's a complicated one.
I mean, I'd be interested to know, do you think other choices are really kind of undervalued at St Martin's?
Absolutely.
You have to have your name
It was then when we were there, and I think even afterwards, I think, you know, you can also go into other aspects of fashion. It's not only design. You could go into, you know, PR. You can go into styling. I mean, stylists are much better off than designers, I have to say. So if you want to be a stylist, you'd be a lot richer. And so I think, yeah, I mean, you have to think kind of you have to think out of the box, really, and not just think that, oh, being my own name is the only way to exist.
And I suppose, but what kind of makes it worthwhile for you is embedding ideas in clothes. And if a young designer wants to do that, then they probably have to.
I mean, if that's the only way that they're happy, they ought to.
Right.
But I think that at this point, like, honestly, we have too many designers. And I think it sounds really arrogant for me to say it, but I don't think we need so many designers. The ones that exist already. I mean, it's like this, you know, and there's also a lot of designers that come out that are very similar to other designers. And I'm thinking, why do we need this? Like, why do you want to recreate the language of somebody else? And I find it peculiar. But then if you have something really new to say, or you have an amazing network and you think you can sell clothes that even if it's not original, your work, and you can sell clothes and create a business, I respect that as well. But if you're just doing it because you think that's the only way to be, I think it's sad, really.
I mean, it's interesting, the idea, if you have something new to say, it's like judging your own ideas is quite difficult.
Well, you could be, obviously you have to interact with people and listen to other opinions as well, and not just blow your own trumpet. I mean, when I first started doing this, I didn't think I was going to be a designer and doing shows and I was going to be in the press or anything like that. I just did what I believed in, and I got encouragement, and, you know, there was people around me that kind of supported me, and one thing led to another. But I never thought, oh my God, I'm going to graduate and be, you know, create my own brand. One thing led to another, and like I said, it was it's in a different era.
Yeah, I mean, it was very. I mean, it's interesting that the era has changed so much, and I assume it will change. I mean, do you have any thoughts on how things are going to change in fashion in the next few years?
God, I hope that we go back to respecting like proper designers who've had the education and who really are passionate about what they do, rather than just buy into someone because they happen to be like a pop star or whatever. I just think it's so sad. And I'd like it to go back to that, really, because, you know, we spend half of our time fitting clothes and being in it, and, you know, I think, in a way, I'm quite old-fashioned about that, and I think it ought to be that way. On the other hand, I think it's going to get more and more you know, personal, in that I think a lot of people will be able to design their own clothes and get their own clothes made somehow via technology. I think it's going to, somehow I see it, like you said, it's many worlds within that world. So I can't see it going in one way only.
It's interesting, that idea about people making their own clothes, though, because that requires everyone to have an idea about what they want to wear. And mostly people are quite lazy about.
But there'll be ways of easing that, I think, where you would be able to put things together in a much easier way, like making a kit. And I see that happening, and then I do think that there will be a sort of gravitation towards respecting real designers more, because it always goes back in circles. And yeah, I think fashion is completely cyclical anyway in every sense. So.
I mean, how do you feel about the way fashion's sort of written about and covered in the kind of media and the press? Is there any interesting kind of writing or discussion?
Often it's kind of what I call purple writing, which is very floral and decorative, and I don't find a lot of fashion writing that exciting. I like the fashion kind of the more, you know, like I mean, there are sort of fashion academics whose writing I find interesting because they link fashion to other things, but I think and there are a few good fashion writers as well who write about fashion only, and they're not academics. But generally speaking, I think you can. It's peculiar. Sometimes you get press reviews where, I don't know if you've experienced this, that you read about the clothes and there's no picture of the garment, but you read about it and you think, well, how am I supposed to be excited by that if there's no picture of the garment? So I think it's become like, again, fashion writers have become very powerful creatures. And it's about the sort of, I don't know, it's about the, you know, I guess power of description. But then I don't get how people really get into that and, you know, get off on how something is described. I don't understand it, because you're describing something visual, but there's no picture of it there necessarily. In fact, I wanted to do a project on this idea.
I mean, are fashion writers powerful? Does that make a difference?
Have you not seen the way they sit in front row?
I know they sit in the front row, but do they make any difference to the way people... I guess they're put in the front row, they must be powerful. I was wondering whether the reviews make any difference and how it's kind of perceived, how it sort of spreads through. I mean, from your own experience, have the reviews made a difference to your...
I would definitely say that the writers in the fashion world are part of the process that we create and part of the whole discourse. There's no way you can separate them, because they are the ones that relay our work to the public. So you can't, they're definitely part of the discourse. I can't separate them. And I think that there are some who've written about my work intelligently, and there's some who just haven't got it at all. And, but generally I think that they've been supportive to me, and I think I can only be thankful. But there's definitely a couple of people that I feel have really been like part of what I do from the beginning and who really know my history. And there's some that don't know it as well, but I think I've been quite lucky in that sense, to be honest.
So you've got your big show coming up at the Musée Decoratif in Paris, and I was wondering, how are you preparing for it? I mean, is that part of looking back at your own collection? Has it encouraged you to look back at your own work?
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting process, because I've been doing this for like 16 years, and I'm 40 now. I was, 24 when I started, and it's become like my life really, where I can't really separate my work life and my sort of, my personal life and my work life is a bit separate now, but for many years it was all kind of mingled. And these museum shows have been like a cleansing process for me, where I really, because you have to edit the work, and the journey is amazing, because every single collection really had so much work that went into it. And I'm thinking, God, how did I do all this work? And of course, there's teams of people that I always work with, but still, every time, really, I was taking the risk personally, mostly, I think it's been like almost. It's a reminder of what you do, because you just move to the next project every time and you forget all the work you've done in the past. So it's a reminder of the amount of work you've done and the power of the work. And it's kind of confidence boosting, I have to say, when you see it all in one space. This show started in Groningen in Holland, and it went to Wolfsburg in Germany, and then came to Design Museum here, then went to the Tokyo Modern Museum, then Istanbul Modern, and now Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. Which is a different setting, because it's not an art museum, it's actually a fashion museum. And so it's challenging, because there's the installations that don't necessarily fit into the vitrines, into the glass cases. But it's also exciting, because, it's such a big venue, and it has lots of people going in, and yeah. I
mean, looking back, is there any particular chapter in your work that you love? I mean, what are you drawn to?
Well, when I was in the late 90s in London, honestly, the amount of work that I was doing, I was virtually living in the studio. I lived above it, and it was a really exciting period, because I didn't know what was going to come. So when you don't know what's going to come, you feel excited about, in a way, not knowing. And then when I start to see that actually I'm going to have financial problems, I'm going to be facing disloyalty, I'm going to be, getting stressed about too much work, because I had to also do consultancy so I can, put that money into the company, etc. I didn't realize how much stress I was going to experience. And I think that that period, actually creatively it was no less, but I think I was more carefree in terms of my future, because I just didn't know what was going to come.
So you were living in the studio, and were you showing in London at that point?
Yeah, I was. And I was really enjoying myself, because I just didn't we never really had a lot of money, and we had to find creative ways of doing things. And
where did you sell your clothes then?
Well, similar boutiques to where we sell now, similar department stores, but, we were a lot smaller. But that not knowing what was going to happen was really liberating. And then, in the sort of early noughties, the kind of stress that I was experiencing from, like, just running the business, and, like I said, being a designer and running a business is two separate things. A lot of people don't think of that. And, I thought, God, this is really stressful, and how am I going to cope? And then you review again what you do, and you find ways around it, and now I feel better. But, I am definitely a busy person.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, in terms of are there any collections that you'd pick out that you look at now and just think that was, can you name a sort of collection or a year where you feel you were really...
I think that for me, the collection with the chadoras was the most, like, oh my, I was so nervous.
Do people know that collection?
Some people would know about it, with the tableau, with the nude that becomes like that gets covered in stages.
Oh, this funny. I think she gets uncovered in stages.
Oh yeah, well you can see it that way.
Around.
You can see it that way.
Yeah.
That collection for me was a real moment, I have to say. I mean, I remember kind of just holding Jane Howe, my stylist, and thinking, oh my God, like, am I going to have a fatwa or something afterwards or something like this? So it was really...
Was that after? That was after the whole Salman Rushdie.
It was, yeah, I think. But it was
think.
Before this whole controversy with, it was 90. I think it was end of '97. That collection for me was. I look at it now and I still really like it. And like I said, it was timeless, really. And that was a bit of a turning point for us, I think, because I'd been showing for 3-4 years before that.
And that was shown in London?
Yeah, at the Atlantis Gallery on Brick Lane.
And so you're staying in Paris for the foreseeable future?
Yes, but like we see with the films, I think there's, in a way, location is getting less and less important. It's about the digital location now, in a way. That, for the moment we're in Paris, yeah.
Can we talk about fashion film that has become something that people seem to be discussing all over the place? What do you think the role of film in fashion is? How
I've been making films since, my first film was like 2003, so for me it's nothing new. And
what was
personally,
your first film?
It's called Temporal Meditations. It's all about Cyprus, really, where I'm from, and I shot it in a disused airport in Athens. That was my first film to show the collection.
Okay.
And it was my menswear collection, in fact. And we showed it in Pitti Uomo in Florence. And that was a really amazing experience for me. But like this whole discussion around fashion film now, I'm not a part of it because I've been doing it for so many years that it's nothing new for me.
Do you think it is an exciting kind of forum for fashion in general? Do you watch other designers' films?
I don't watch other designers' films. I could, but I don't. I haven't. I think it is an exciting medium because you can control the atmosphere, you can control the sound, you can control the choreography. It's like an ultimate show, really, that you have control over, because a live event is really the same thing, but things can go wrong, and that's the charm of it, that it can go wrong. I think with the film, you have control over the, what you really want to convey or the feelings that you want to evoke. So that's really what I like about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that's what you say, because watching a lot of fashion film, you feel it is a bit like the Wild West, that people are just hiring very kind of young filmmakers to do anything, not really giving them a budget, not really giving them a brief, and so you get these kind of very odd, scrappy films attached to quite major brands, which really is quite surprising. For me, it's been really important to direct them myself and to edit them with the editor myself. I think because it then, I have this hands-on approach always, really, and I think it's really important because my work is personal, and of course, like I said, I have teams of people that help me, and but there's always a personal element for me, and I've worked with Marcus Tomlinson in the beginning, who made films of my clothes as well, but mostly I've done them on my own, and it's a really enriching experience. The project I did with Tilda Swinton for the Venice Biennale also wasn't a fashion film, but it involved clothes in some way, and it was a real proper human experience for me. In what sense?
Intense.
Yeah.
As in, it was really good fun. You know, she really got into it, and it was a very difficult project. I mean, some of you who've seen the Design Museum show would have seen it there. But yeah, I think it's a good medium for me, but definitely film is time-consuming, and especially if you're a perfectionist. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So next time it's a catwalk show.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
In a kind of I mean, we haven't really talked about the things that people do tend to write about in your shows, which are the kind of the mobile dress or the, you know, the kind of the moment where everyone goes,
Yeah.
I mean, would you do that again? Is that a moment that you're keen on?
You know what? I will do whatever feels right, because I don't want to be slave to somebody else's expectations. I think I'll just do what feels right. And of course, I always try to push boundaries and push myself, but I don't want to also kill myself, you know, doing these things. And yeah.
I mean, when you the collection, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, with when the models put on the clothes and the chairs, and what's that called?
It's called Afterwards.
Afterwards, that's it. And that collection sold for museum entire.
Yeah.
And is that something that you're kind of aiming towards with those pieces?
A lot of our stuff is owned by museums and sold to museums, and I feel very lucky that there's that duality. Because I don't think there are many designers that have that, where your stuff could be in the shops, but it can also be owned by a museum. It is quite exciting.
And does it mean something to you to show in a museum, to be owned by a museum? Does it?
Absolutely, because it has a different audience. You can look at you control the way you look at, the audience can control the way they look at something. They can spend as much time around it, whereas a fashion show is instant, it passes. You know, whereas with a museum or a gallery, you can walk around something, you can spend time on it. It's a different setting altogether. But I feel lucky that we've had that duality in the work, that, you know, in one hand, like I said, museums and galleries, and on the other hand, it could be in a fashion store. And yeah.
I was wondering, I've said that there weren't, do you want to have any questions? No? Are we going to have to end soon? We're going to have to end soon. One lucky question? One lucky question. Has anyone got a question they want to ask? Yes.
Hiya. You said you were doing films for quite some time now. How else do you see fashion projected other than catwalks and films?
I think that the next step would be how you actually get the clothes on engage with real people who want to buy the clothes and somehow make that your presentation. That would be a really exciting thing for me. So how I can engage people who really wear the clothes and turn that into an event. That would be amazing, and I'm thinking of ways around it. So, yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you for the lucky question.
Thank you.
Is there anything I've missed out that you'd like to, that you feel is important to communicate at this point?
There is always more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was, I really enjoyed that, so thank you very much.
You.
I hope you did.